Aubrey, you ready?
Yes, I was just trying to get the chat up, but I'll be fine. Okay, let's go.
Yay! Hello, everybody. We are live on the YouTube with our wonderful friends. Thank you so much for tuning in to our live streams, specifically this live stream. We are going to be talking to you today, and we're going to be interviewing the incredible Martha Wells, who is the author of so many, many things. Thank you for joining us. While we wait for the thing to load all the way, because the beginning of these videos often gets cut out, I will say hello to everybody in the chat. Hello, Kendra. Hello, Crow Gould, who is joining us from New York. Hello, Kathy. Hello, people are joining us from York, England, Chicago, Victoria, BC, Germany, South Berwick, Maine, Spokane, Boulder, Colorado, Murderbot.
People are excited.
Oh my gosh. Okay. And now that we are all here, everybody please say, welcome our incredible guest. It's Martha Wells.
Yay!
Hi.
Thank you for being here so much. We are so
thank you for inviting me.
We are so excited.
Something to do.
Absolutely. Well, we're so excited. We were all at the same convention in Dublin this summer, but we didn't get to hang out or anything. So I'm very glad that now we get to do it from our respective homes in our the comfort of our own rooms, which is nice.
Yeah, I'm sorry I didn't get to meet you all in person.
That's okay. We saw you from a distance, and your hair looked great. So
thank you. Yeah. That's the important part.
It absolutely is the important part. Well, I'm going to begin by telling everybody, just in case they don't, but I think by the number of people yelling Murderbot in the chat, I think they do know who you are. Martha Wells has written many fantasy novels, including the books of the Rexxor. I think I have never heard it said out loud, but I've read it a lot. Beginning with the Cloud Roads, the Illy Wren, okay, that one I've never heard said out loud, series, including The Death of the Necromancer, as well as YA fantasy novel, short stories, media tie-in for Star Wars and Stargate Atlantis, and nonfiction. Her most recent fantasy novel is The Harbors of the Sun in 2017, the final novel in the Books of the Rexxor series. There's many more things happening in that world, though. I know. She has a new series, The Murderbot Diaries, which now has 4 novellas and one novel coming out soon, published by Tor.com. She was also the lead writer for the story team of Magic the Gathering's Dominaria expansion in 2018.
Yeah.
She has won a Nebula Award, 2 Hugo's Award. Oh my God, there's so many. An ALA, YALSA Alex Award, 2 Locus Awards, and her work has appeared on the Philip K. Dick Award ballot, the BSFA Award ballot, USA Today bestseller list, and the New York Times bestseller list. Her books have been published in 16 languages. Welcome to the program.
Yay! Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
Of course. We have spent a lot of time yelling about how great Murderbot is.
It's true.
So we wanted to talk to you, and we are so happy you're here. So let's begin the interview and stop just complimenting you. So what is...
It'll still happen.
Can you talk to us a little bit about your writing origin story?
I kind of always wanted to be a writer. I'm not really sure why. I always liked telling stories. I kind of started with fanfic, I guess, because when I was really little, I'm old, so it was back when we only had like 5 TV channels, the networks, and like 1 independent, and you know, 2 independents, 1 that you could see and 1 that was really fuzzy and mostly black and white. They would show Godzilla movies in the afternoon. So and then there was a Godzilla cartoon also at that time, and I was, as a kid, I was like deeply into that, and also it was reruns of Lost in Space and Land of the Giants and those kinds of shows. And so I would draw maps of Monster Island on like 8 by, that typing paper, and make gigantic pieces. And so we had a large living room, and I would like cover this whole living room floor with these giant maps, and try to write little stories and stuff to go with the TV show. So that's my first writing experience. And I kind of always wanted to be a professional writer. And when I went to I went to Texas A&M University, and I actually chose it because Starlog magazine, there was no online at this point when I went to college.
Yes.
So Starlog magazine was kind of a big source for fandom. It had would have letters from people and talk about fan groups in different places. along with the movie and TV stuff. And I picked Texas A&M because there was a listing in it for Starlog Magazine that had a science fiction fantasy community
Oh,
or
cool.
a committee that put on a science fiction convention. And so I went to college and joined the committee and worked on the science fiction convention. And I met Stephen Gould, who's an SF author. He wrote Jumper, which was made into a movie several years ago. And he had a little writing workshop, and I joined his workshop and probably wrote my first my first or second original story for that workshop. And so I got, through the convention and through Steve and Laura Mixon and other people that were there, I got kind of a lot of information about science fiction fantasy writing, and just kept going to workshops and until I was finally, I didn't sell a novel until my first book came out in 1993. That was The Element of Fire, and that was a fantasy tour, and I think I sold it in 1991. It took a couple of years to come out. That's how I started out. That was many years ago.
That's amazing. The maps on the floor and the watching all the shows like that. I feel like that the line between that and like all your amazing world building, and also the fact that Murderbot is constantly watching shows, it's just like that line is so straight. I love it so much.
It is.
That's wonderful. So I want to talk about the Murderbot Diaries, which, as we said, has 4 novellas now and 1 novel and a couple of stories as well. Yes.
Yeah, one story that's going to be coming out, and then a couple stories. I forgot about the other one. Yeah, there was one that came out earlier this year in Wired magazine.
So what was the seed of this story? Where did this come from?
I'm not really sure.
Okay.
I was working. It was I wrote it in 2016. Yeah, and I was finishing up the end of The Harbors of the Sun, which was the last book in the Books of Rexxor series, and it was a bit different. I was trying to make it. With the last 2 books, I kind of wanted to go on a more epic scale. So it was kind of hard, and I had been working really hard on it, and I was finally finishing, and it turned out not to be quite finished because I had to go back later and add 100 pages, but I had kind of like this really creative surge or something. I started getting all these different ideas for stories, which is kind of, common. Usually it happens in the middle of the book and you're trying to distract yourself. And you come
That's
up with all
familiar
these
to
ideas.
us as well. Yes.
Yeah. But this is at the end. And so I got this idea, and the first scene that came to me was Dr. Mensah and Murderbot in the cubicle where Dr. Mensah knocks on the cubicle wall, which is kind of this kind of really transgressive act for that society. And I was kind of trying to think about it, and who were these characters, why, what was going on, and I thought, well, I'll just write some notes down so I remember this, because I like this idea and I want to do something with it. And I wrote like 5 pages just of the first of that scene, I think, and I think I wrote a little bit of the beginning too. And so I made myself stop and then went and finished Harbors of the Sun, and then came back like the day after I finished Harbors of the Sun. I went and started All Systems Red. It wasn't called that. It didn't have a title at that point. And originally my idea was it was going to be a short story, and it was going to have a sad ending. Murderbot was going to die at the end very nobly, and then I'm going along going, oh, that's stupid. I don't like that. So I wasn't really sure what the ending was going to be. And I realized it needed to be longer, and also it needed to be novella length. And since Tor.com was doing a lot with novellas at that time, that seemed like a good idea. There would be a market for it. So if I could just get them to buy it, basically. I got to the end finally, kind of like wasn't really sure what was going to happen until I got to the end, and then thought, yeah, I want Murderbot to leave, because otherwise, if it stays, it's like trading up to better captors, basically. I wanted it to go out on its own. And finished it and sent it, had a couple of friends read it and sent it off to my agent, and she really loved it, and she submitted it, and a little bit later that year, Lee actually ran into Lee at the Worldcon in Kansas City that year. He told me he was going to buy it. So
Yay!
exciting.
That's great. The chat is unanimously saying, "Thanks for not killing Murderbot. Murderbot. I would have rioted."
It was a dumb. It would have been dumb. It would have been too. It would almost been too easy. I always feel like if you kill off a main character like that, you're not solving. I mean, some people have made it work really well. I don't want to like universally condemn it, because I've read some books where I liked it that they did that, but it just felt like this is a really difficult situation, and if it dies, then I didn't deal with that situation. So I always kind of try to take the harder road instead of the easy one.
Yeah, absolutely. So Murderbot has this aspect of like being a narrator, and has this relatable aspect of like this person or this character who thinks they're very objective, but they aren't, which makes a lot of sense, because there is sort of the kind of robot construct. Can you talk about like your relationship with robots with feelings? Like, do you have a history with robots and writing a robot?
Not really. This was
okay.
This was besides Stargate Atlantis and Star Wars. I didn't write any robot POV or point of view in Star Wars. This
do
was
you
my
enjoy
first...
them in media or anything? Have you really?
Oh yeah,
yeah.
This was my first time to write a robot, and it was my first time to write science fiction, actually.
Oh wow. Okay.
Besides Stargate Atlantis and all that, and I've always been a science fiction reader, so I've read a lot of that. I had actually recently read, not really recently, I guess I read it when it came out, was Ancillary Justice, and that series by Ann Leckie, which I really enjoyed. So that was probably the most recent thing that I can remember reading that had like an artificial intelligence character. Though they're pretty prevalent in science fiction.
Yeah.
But no, I didn't have any particular experience or anything. I did work in computer support for a long time, and wrote and I had to write software, and particularly software to deal with databases and user interfaces, that kind of thing. So I don't have really any. People ask me questions about real AI, and I'm like, I don't know. It's like I probably know as much as you know, but I do kind of know a little bit about working with humans interacting with software and how badly that can go wrong.
Sure.
Yes.
Well, and Murderbot also, I feel like Murderbot thinks that they're software, but really has just like, it's so human and it's just so relatable. It's like, I'm acting logically. And it's makes me so okay. Like can you talk about, I don't know how, I'm not a writer, so I don't know how deep you want to go into your like process, but like this narrator is, I mean, it's very different from like the narrator in the other books of yours that I've read, in that they're just, I don't know, they're so kind of, he's angry and also like objective and not being objective. And like, is it fun to write as Murderbot, or is it like, what's it? Are you frustrated with them?
It's when it's going well, it's really fun, and it tends to go fast. But the idea of the narrator being very different is usually with each thing I write, I have to figure out the voice for that book or story or whatever. And once I figure out the voice, it usually is a lot easier to get going. I just recently sold a fantasy short story to Uncanny Magazine, and it took me a year to write, and like probably 90% of that was trying to figure out, it's like I can see the story in my head. Why won't it work? Why does it feel so stupid? And it's like, because I didn't have it took me that long to get the right voice for the character. But with Murderbot, it is occasionally frustrating, because most of it's like working out the plots are not especially complicated, but the logistics of what Murderbot is doing and being able to see things from so many different viewpoints at one time, and having to take all that into account all the time, like all the different, when it goes into a situation, you have to think about, okay, what security cameras can it access, and what are they going to be seeing, and what countermeasures are going to be deployed against it that it has to take care of. And you have to think about all those things, which is a lot different from just a normal human person with only their senses and whatever, walking into a situation. So basically all this technology and systems that it has access to are like extensions of its physical senses. So you kind of have to do that. And so, and also kind of just figuring out what I want to do. The emotional stuff is really pretty complex for me. So, but the first one, it just all systems red. I think it took me a month, and that was I had a back injury in the middle of it, had to stop for a few days, and they only took me a month to write. It's about 32,000 words, I think, for a novella. The others are only a little bit longer, but each one took me about 3 months, and a lot of that was write 5,000 to 10,000 words, go back and take most of that out and start again, write another 5,000 to 10,000 words and take most of that out and start again. And a lot of it was finding the plot and kind of the emotional through line for the characters. Like for Artificial Condition, when I started, art was actually not in it when I started that, which seems really stupid and incredible thing to do now. It's like, why would you do that? You know, but and Murderbot was already on the space station, and I kind of realized the second or third space station, I kind of realized I needed to explain better why it could pass as human, because I kind of intentionally didn't give a lot of detail about its appearance. So I was thinking, well, it would need to do this and that. Well, it could have run into a transport that helped it do that. And then that was just like a paragraph. And then I kept going along and going, that paragraph is really interesting. And I actually want to write that story rather than this thing I'm working on now. So I went back and so I can add this and started and wrote meeting the transport, and then art just kind of walked onto the page fully formed and was just such an interesting, their interactions were so interesting. I decided to make it a much bigger part of the story and have it stay with Murderbot the whole time, and basically be the kind of the guy in the chair, basically, who helps Murderbot, you know, and comes up with stuff. So.
We're both crying, by the way, you talking
really?
about art. Just like, we love art so much. So the sci-fi, the technology in this world, and like the future you've developed, is this are you doing like research into technology and projecting out a future, or what sort of, when you develop this world, kind of what kind of parts are you putting into it?
Well, one of the reasons I like writing fantasy better than science fiction is that it is really hard to do that because our technology is changing so fast. It's very hard to extrapolate what we're going to have. It's like I think the biggest problem is people don't think big enough. So when you're doing far future, I find that more comfortable because you can say it's the far future, you know, they have this is what they have, and that's it. I'm not going to explain how, you know, the transition happened from Earth or whatever. And so I don't do I do a little bit of research on when I come up with something that Murderbot needs to do, and then I'll kind of read up on it and see if there's a better way or whatever, or see if there's anything interesting that it could exploit. There's a bit in Network Effect that came from that about actually being able to, I'm probably gonna mess it up when I try to explain it, but it's the encoding, putting code that's readable by machine readable code into human DNA.
Oh.
And
yeah.
I read that and went, oh yeah, that explains almost everything about my world that I built here. So yeah, so no, I don't do a lot of, I probably do a lot more research for my fantasy novels and trying to figure out, like, you know, how bats fly and weird stuff like that than I did for these.
Cool. That's awesome. Well, one of the best things about Murderbot, which, other than everything, is that they find a lot of comfort in binging TV shows. And I've read that you kind of base some of these shows on real shows.
Oh, yeah.
So can you tell us like about Sanctuary Moon and how you translate that?
Sanctuary Moon is basically the space version of How to Get Away with Murder.
Oh,
so, and I kind of, it helps me to base all the TV shows on real shows that I watch, because then it's easy to drop in little lines about them, because it's kind of easy to take that idea and think, okay, well, this is the premise of this show. How would this work in this far future environment? What would it be? You know, and you kind of transform it. And this is kind of like Sanctuary Moon is basically you know, in for an evening mystery drama on a space colony. I think it's a colony. No, it's a mining. Yeah, I think it's a mining colony. I can't remember.
It's so
it's
good.
I do have to go back and read them occasionally
Yeah.
to keep,
Yeah. And then what is the other one's World Hoppers? Is that
World Hoppers is Stargate and Stargate Atlantis, but
perfect? Of course. Yeah.
Kind of transformed into this basically the world of the corporation rim, where people would go out and look for these wormholes and everything, and then gosh, there's the one from Network Effect at the end where there's the one that I think it's Time Stream Defenders Orion is Legends of the Future. Is that what it's called?
Oh, the
just lost the
Arrow,
name of
the
my
Arrow
favorite
show.
Not the Arrow, the
the superhero team up show.
Yeah. I just lost the name of my favorite show. That happens to me a lot. But
the chat will tell us in 20 seconds.
The chat will
yes, they will.
Legends of Tomorrow.
Legends of
Tomorrow.
With Victor Garber.
Yes.
Yeah, so I had to find that brain cell.
Yeah, amazing. I love the idea of Murderbot watching that. That's amazing. Amazing. Aubrey had a question. Do you want to ask your question?
I do have a question. Are any of the characters, the friends, or found family based on any real people?
Not really.
Okay.
I kind of sometimes some of them I envision as actors, but that usually when I start doing that, I'll start out with a character and kind of like Dr. Mensa. Viola Davis is one of my favorite actors, so that's who I envision. But the more I write them, usually they'll start to kind of lose that actor's image and kind of look like themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not really based on anybody in specifically.
Mm-hmm.
I don't usually do that. I usually they're just kind of like, I don't know, conglomerations of people where you take different traits or something and put them together.
That's they're really cool. Yeah, I was rereading, oh gosh, I don't remember all of them. And just like you do cool things with like the different gender and pronouns and stuff with the characters too, which is always just like such a satisfying as a non-binary person, just be like, yes, it's the future. It's happening. We don't have to make a big deal about it. We're all happy. So okay, I want to talk about Books of the Rexxor a little bit. Is that okay?
Okay, yeah.
Although the first question is kind of about both, which is that I think that, and I could be wrong, but it feels like at least at the beginning, those books have a theme with Murderbot that I really enjoy, which is like a character who thinks they're alone and they find this community who really wants to include them, and they kind of are like, no. So what kind of appeals to you about this kind of story and this kind of character?
It probably just appeals to me because I've felt alone a lot in my life and have had kind of trouble finding groups to fit in with. And also specifically the books, the Rexxor, that what I wanted to do with that was really almost the idea of what happens after Happily Ever After. Because in a lot of stories, Moon's story would end when Stone finds him and he takes him to his people, and then everything's supposed to be, hunky-dory and happily ever after, and that's not what happened. It's like a lifetime lived alone doesn't give you many coping mechanisms for living in that society, which is so close-knit, and dealing with these interpersonal conflicts that they have. And so that's kind of the story I wanted to tell. And basically, that's 5 books and 2 novella collections later. There we are, and kind of show that progression from actually how long it took him from the moment when he was supposed to fit in to when he actually did fit in at the end of the series.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think you mentioned this just a minute ago, and something clicked in my brain. But so the Rexxorans, they're like so different than anything I've like read about. So where does this species come from? Like, where does this idea of these winged talon creatures come from?
Well, the idea was, I was trying to write something else. It's almost kind of like what happened with All Systems, or with Artificial Condition. Actually, I was trying to write something else that was more because before Books of the Rexxor and before Stargate Atlantis and all that, I did a lot of kind of historical based fantasy where it would be a secondary world but based very heavily on a historical time period and place. And I was kind of trying to do that again. And there was this character, I wanted this character that looked like a demon, who was actually going to be a secondary character, and then who had been brought into this world. And that was Moon, basically. Yeah. And then I started coming up with his backstory about, you know, being alone and being found by this other older character. And then I was like, you know, this backstory is like really interesting. It's, you know, this other thing I'm writing is kind of crappy and it's not going very fast. I don't like it, but this backstory is really interesting. So I started kind of working on that, and that turned into the Cloud Roads. So
cool. So just like a whole species of people who look like demons, and then
and that was the idea. Is they were in that idea got brought over from the other thing where they would be sort of human looking in one form, and then a really scary form in the other, and be very alien looking. And so that's where that came from.
That's awesome. When I read these books, I also I'm so fascinated by like the gender dynamics of it, because it feels like in some ways like completely reversed, but also in other ways just like so completely different than anything I've ever read. Like, how is this something based on like research or animals, or just like completely from your brain, this society?
It's kind of from my brain.
Yeah.
When I came up with the way they would work, the way that it sort of lent itself that these are not going to have traditional or human traditional male female gender roles. You know, they're going to be different. And at that time, actually, I didn't know very much about non-binary people. I didn't know as much about gender as I think is more common knowledge now. And I wish I kind of did, because there was things I would have done differently. I think I would have leaned into that more and really made the different gender roles of the Rexxor more specific.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't know how to do that at the time. So a lot of it was just coming up with it. I didn't really set out to make them that different, but what happened was when I was developing the biology and the culture, it really kind of the story just really lent itself that way, and it made the characters, you know, again, I didn't see it as being, you know, antlion be people who fly, and our shapeshifters are probably not gonna, you know, live in, you know, the 50s. The annoying thing about a lot of older science fiction, where it's like supposedly 10,000 years in the future and people float around and there's planets that are like, you know, and these really bizarre things, and yet everyone isn't like a 1950s housewife or a 1950s working dude. So yeah. I didn't want to do.
Yeah, I used to play a game where it's like, how far can I get into Foundation until there's a female or whatever? It's not a fun game, but
no,
you know,
it isn't. Not fun.
That's awesome. Well,
and they're still smoking. They're all still smoking.
It's like, what are we doing? What are we doing, folks? Well, the books are amazing. And everybody, if you've read Murderbot and you're waiting anxiously for Network Effect to come out, go read Martha Wells's other books. They're so good. And there are a whole archive since 1993 of them.
There's a bunch of them.
There's so many, and they're really, really great. Well, I have a few final questions for you. One of them is especially relevant these days, which is you are a writer who writes. I imagine you write from home a lot. Do you have work from home habits or advice for folks who find themselves in this position now?
I've been working from home for a long time, probably since I think it's 2006. And actually, for me, probably my best advice is you're not going to be productive throughout this whole 8-hour period, and try to figure out when is the best time of day you can be productive. For me, I get up early, and it's earliest in the morning is for me is the best time to actually like try to make my brain work. as the day goes on. I mean, it's after 1 o'clock for me, and I'm like, what is my book's name?
Yeah.
So yeah, try to figure that out, and don't be hard on yourself when you can't keep to the same schedule, because it's like, we're all different and we all are more productive. Some people will have their most productive period at 4 a.m. basically, and other people it'll be at 6 a.m. And there's also something called decision fatigue, and I think that's what affects a lot of people. And I mostly know about in the context of writing, and it's basically the idea that the more making a decision and the harder decision it is, it uses up the same kind of energy as like a physical act would, and so you just get the more decisions you make, you kind of run out of a certain amount of energy, and then your decisions start to get really bad, basically. And there's a lot of things based on that. It's like why they put the candy and gum and the fun things you don't need in the supermarket checkout aisle, because especially if people have a limited budget, they've been making all these decisions as they move through the store. Is it this one or that one, or can we afford this? And by the time you get there, you're worn down basically, and they know they can get you and buy the stupid candy or the stupid magazine or whatever. So, and it works like that with writers, is though that's why some people are able to work a lot longer than others, and some people can't. It's just an individual thing about how your brain works. Especially with writing, it's like you see so many things. I don't think it's as prevalent as it was a couple of years ago, where people are saying you have to write 50,000 words a day, or you're not a real writer, or you have to do this, or you're not a real writer. And it's like, if I do 1,000 words, I feel pretty good about myself. And sometimes, especially with Network Effect, which took me 18 months to write because it was hard. It was a hard book to write. I would be getting 500 words a day. And that was all I could do. And if I tried to push myself, it was just crap that had to be taken out later. So everybody has, an individual way of working and the way your brain works, and you have to kind of figure that out and what's best for you. And basically whatever results in a finished piece of work was a good way to do it, basically. And you can't really compare yourself to other people, because everybody, everybody's different.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
amazing advice. Thank
That's
you
great.
so much.
Thank you. Do you have any book recommendations of things that you've been enjoying, fiction, nonfiction?
Yes, actually, right now I'm reading Nora Jemison's new book, The City We Became.
Oh, wonderful.
And I've also just finished reading, Sharon Shin has, I don't know if I have them out here. It's the Echo series. It's a 3-book series. It's an audiobook, ebook, and I think paperback, and it's Echo and Amethyst, Echo and Onyx. And that's a fantasy series, and that's really good. I've read the first 2, and I'm fixing to start the second one, or the third one, I mean. I really loved the Tiger's Daughter series. That's a 3-book thing with Tay Arsenault Rivera. Unraveling by Karen Lord. That's kind of a fantasy mystery set in, I think, near future. That was really good. The Luminous Dead by Caitlin Starling. I don't even, it would have been, I got an arc of it and I just started reading it. And it was so gripping. It's basically cave kind of psychological horror in a science fiction. And it's just utterly gripping. And it's like, I don't even like psychological horror, but I have to keep reading until they get out of it, until she gets out of this cave.
Oh no.
Yeah, I love Karen Lord. She wrote The Best of All Possible Worlds. That's an older book. That's one of my favorites. The Jade City and Jade War by Fonda Lee. Yeah, there's just a bunch of stuff. I post recommendations on my journal, and I have a Goodreads. I don't do reviews on Goodreads, but I post what I read, and there's a lot. I try to keep up with new authors. I really feel strongly about staying current with the field and trying to read new people as much as you can. I have old favorites too. I really like the Ben Aronovich Rivers of London series. That's been going on for a while. And it's a really, really excellent series. Oh, and Ann Leckie's new book, was it The Raven Tower? The fantasy? That was really good. So I read all kinds of stuff.
That's amazing. Everyone in the chat's like, okay, all right, we got this. We got a list. It's amazing. Well, folks, obviously Network Effect comes out May 5th. Is there anything else people should be looking forward to or coming out soon? I mean, that's the big one. So
that's the big one. And that's, I have a short story in Uncanny Magazine that'll be coming out. I'm not sure, they haven't told me when yet. It'll be sometime this year, I think. And I have, and then there's the story. You can get a short story if you pre-order, I think, the hardcover of Network Effect. You can get a free short story, and you have to go to Macmillan and fill in a little form and send them a screen cap or whatever of your order thing, and then on May 5th they'll send you the short story. It's a short story that takes place before Network Effect. Ooh. And it'll be actually published sometime afterward, but I'm not sure how firm the plans. It will be available to everybody, but
Lee says or the ebook.
Sure huh?
Lee says or the ebook.
Lee says or the okay, yeah, he knows. Yeah, so if you pre-order the ebook, I have people keep telling me, well, it's not this, it's not that, and it's like, well, I don't know. I'm not Macmillan. Like, go look at the.
You're not also a publisher?
I'm not also the publisher. So Lee said, and he should know, if you pre-order the ebook also, you can get the short story.
Yay!
Awesome. Everybody watching, the description of this video has links to Martha's website and how to buy all the books. And you have time to catch up on all of the Murderbot novellas before the novel comes out. And the novel is amazing, and you're going to cry and feel so many emotions and need to...
In a good way.
But it's better, to have an emotion about Murderbot than about real people, as Murderbot says.
Yeah.
It's so good. So
art is in the novel. If you like art,
oh
art is
yeah,
in the novel. A lot.
People are saying in the chat,
in the
like, I hope art is in the novel.
Oh yes.
Oh boy.
You're in for a treat.
Yeah, it's so good. Well, thank you, Martha, so much for joining us on our live stream. We really appreciate you taking the time.
Oh, thank you for inviting me. I really enjoyed it. It gave me something to do. It gave me connection with people, other people that don't already live in my house.
I know the feeling. It's important. Thank you so much. Anybody watching, we are going to be back in about 20 minutes doing a Jackbox Games live stream with some of our friends, so stick around. And we're also going to keep live streaming, so check out the description of this video for our continued schedule and everything the Doubleclicks have going on. And thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.
Bye.